Oh, I'm sorry. Did I break your concentration?
Whether you're 20 or 40 years old, chances are you've probably heard of the movie Pulp Fiction, a mid-90s film directed by Quentin Tarantino. Many call it one of the greatest films ever made. But why? Why was it so significant? Why do so many love it? And why was this movie considered Tarantino's masterpiece? You're listening to Our Radio Hour on 88.1 FM WNTH Winnetka, the voice of New Trier. My name is Matt, and today we are taking you back to 1994. This is Pulp Fiction. So recently I saw Pulp Fiction because many film critics said it was one of their favorite movies, but to be honest, I thought it was super boring. I did watch the entire thing, but it was hard for me to do so. Now this movie came out 9 years before I was even born, so I needed to get some opinions from people who actually watched the movie when it came out 23 years ago. I interviewed 2 teachers, Miss Neptune and Mr. Atwell. Both have seen the movie. The first question I asked them was, what were your initial reactions to the movie?
I think I was surprised at the amount of violence that was in it.
I have to say that as I think about it, I have a similar reaction to a lot of his movies in that there is a level of violence that's in those movies that it seems a bit gratuitous.
So violence in the movie is a big thing. You know, when the movie came out, the violence was pretty excessive. There was one scene in particular where a guy's head gets blown apart with a gun and blood goes everywhere. There was another scene where John Travolta gets absolutely obliterated with a mini Uzi. For me though, maybe it's because of the generation I grew up in, it didn't seem too violent for me. I've seen a lot of violence, so the violence in Pulp Fiction wasn't terribly significant for me. Keeping in mind that this movie came out way before The Hunger Games, 300, or Rambo. The next question I asked was, did the plotline seem confusing or was it all connected in some way?
I remember being confused.
Again, I think maybe in the moment it's confusing, kind of like, wait, where are we now? But by the end of the movie, you're like, oh, it all ties together. So I think in moments, yes, it seemed like sort of some random things, but as the movie went on, you realized where he was dropping you in the timeline, and pieces started to come together.
This is another element in the movie that confused me. In the movie, it dropped you right into the scene, and there wasn't much explanation for it. I would have to agree with what Mr. Atwell said, though, which is that it started out confusing, but towards the end of the movie, it all seemed to come together. The interesting thing about Pulp Fiction is that it wasn't told in chronological order, and it was one of the first movies to do that. It made Pulp Fiction truly unique.
But you know what the funniest thing about Europe is?
What?
It's the little differences.
Example.
All right, well, you can walk into a movie theater in Amsterdam and buy a beer. And I don't mean just like no paper cup, I'm talking about a glass of beer. And in Paris, you can buy beer in McDonald's. And you know what they call a quarter pounder with cheese in Paris?
They don't call it a quarter pounder with cheese?
They call it Royale with cheese.
Royale with cheese.
That's right.
What do they call a Big Mac?
Well, Big Mac's a Big Mac, but they call it Le Big Mac.
Le Big Mac.
So what I've concluded is that Pulp Fiction was significant. A movie like this had never been seen before, and the level of cinematography and violence was different from other movies. I think there's really one word that can truly sum up this movie: unique. This has been Matt reporting for Our Radio Hour from the Northfield campus of New Trier High School. Stay tuned for the next episode of Our Radio Hour on 88.1 WNTH Winnetka.
You'll be a woman soon. I love you so much, can't count all the ways I died for you, girl, and all they can say is he's not your kind. They never get tired of putting it down, and I never know when I come around what I'm gonna find. Don't let them